Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here, got another Master Duel video for you. So today, we are finally turning to a deck that I've been kind of looking forward to ever since I started really realizing the power of the Ishizu cards when I was playing Aramesir, and that is a good old-fashioned Ishizu pile. If you watched me, particularly when Rose Tinny or Halkdon, whatever you want to call the Halki Fibrax Aurodon combo deck, if you watched me when that deck was the big thing last summer, then you'll know I actually have a huge affinity for decks like this. I really like pile decks. I think pile decks are a lot of fun. For those who aren't familiar with the idea of a quote-unquote pile deck, it's called such because it's really not any one focused archetype, but just more of a pile of cards that work well together. And like I said, I'm a huge fan of decks like this. I just think it's really cool, the ability to like mix and match so many different engines, and yet they all work well together to form a cohesive deck. I also just am really tickled by the notion of just playing like all the good stuff in a single deck. Like the idea of like, let's just play all our staples in one deck. Like surely it's gonna be good, right? And there are some formats where the answer is actually yes, and this is one of them. Now I will say that, oh, you know what? I should have been more prepared than this. I should have pulled up the person who actually got top 16 with this deck at the latest MCS. My list is actually very similar to theirs. I'm just pulling up the list right now. This was Trishula, of course. Yeah, Trishula got top 16 with a list extremely similar to this. There's a few card differences, like I'm on PSY Framegear Gammas in the main. I believe they had them in the side. Let's see, I'm also on a Legal Knight in the main, just to potentially give us another utility tool to search out for the, what is it called, for the adventure package. And on top of that, I was also actually in my initial draft of this deck playing one or two, I don't remember, Spright Starter, and then also a Spright Red. You might see those in one of the games. I'm pretty sure one of the games I left was from that iteration, but those are also something to consider as well. Just got to keep in mind the fact that you get two locked with those. So, but they could be potential like additional engine or like board pieces for the end board there. So yeah, I mean the idea of this deck is the concept is fairly simple, but how it plays out is often anything but. The concept here though is that we're just taking a bunch of good cards that are good to like that will either proc or get milled by the Ishizu millers, and then just kind of like playing a bunch of various engines that are, again, also just good. I mean, it's like I said, a pile deck is essentially just a pile of good cards, and that's really what we're rocking right here. So, in particular, I will explain some of the engines that might look a little bit odd. I know you're probably wondering about the Denier of Herald in particular. I like this card in this deck for multiple reasons, even if we're only rocking one copy. It's not only a level 2 monster, so that's good for the Spright stuff, and can potentially be searched out by Gigantic Spright, but on top of that, it's also a tuner that can adjust its level. That'll allow for a pretty huge variety of what synchro monsters you can summon. You see we're rocking a Psychic End Punisher in the Ishizu pile extra deck here. I also crafted this card not just for this deck, but also because I've been debating putting it in Adamantipator as well, potentially. Basically, you know, we have, of course, the typical punk line that we've seen of you know, E-Telly or normal summon Ze Amin to search a Foxy Tune, use Foxy Tune to special Deer Note, sync Ze Amin and Deer Note to get out the Chaos Ruler, and then usually what we do is we use Deer Note to bring back the Foxy Tune, and then overlay into Zombie Vampire. But another play you can potentially make is instead of bringing back the Foxy Tune, instead you use Deer Note's effect to bring back the Ze Amin. Then you can sync the Ze Amin and the Chaos Ruler into the Psychic End Punisher, which is a pretty good Towers effect. Your life points are going to be less than your opponent's because you paid 600 for Ze Amin, so it should be unaffected. And then, yeah, it'll just always win battles, and just generally an extremely good card. Oh, and then to finish what I was saying earlier, too, the Denier of the Herald. This can allow you to send the Herald of the Arclight, which will let you add the Illusion of Chaos, which can add Magician's Souls, which can then send the Illusion of Chaos from the deck to summon itself and be an extra material on the field. So, Denier is, you know, a good way to thin out your deck and then also get an extra monster on the board. But you might be thinking, well, okay, then you have Denier and Magician's Souls. What can you do from there? From that point, Denier is level 6, Magician's Souls level 7. Could potentially sink for level 7 to put a Fairy Tale Snow in the graveyard. That might not seem like much of an impactful play, but do not underestimate this card. Fairy Tale Snow is stupidly powerful, especially in decks like this, where it gets milled more often thanks to the Ishizu stuff. And just in general is like extremely. We'll definitely see in games ahead just how good this card is. We're also rocking orange Heralds in this deck. I know I said I took them out of the Emancipator deck because it felt like they were dead and didn't come up enough. We are playing a couple more fairies to complement the orange Heralds here in this build. Not only do we have the Diviner, but we also have the Artifact Scythe. So the orange Heralds have been a little more consistent here. Ideally, I would like a few more fairies. I actually had a draft I didn't play test, but I had a draft of this deck where instead of the PSY Framegear Gammas and the Driver, I played 3 Herald of Greenlight as well, which is literally just Herald of Orange Light, but for spell effects. I just worried that it was going to be a little bit too niche use. In a meta like this, where like, yes, you know, there are a bunch of grass decks, and so you want to be negating grass, at the same time, you know, these decks are mostly monsters, and generally speaking, monster effects are the way to go. Now, to be fair, there are decks other than pile decks out there right now. There's, of course, Runic Spright and Spright in general. Like, Herald of Greenlight is generally good, I think, or, like, generally has use. I just wonder if it's better than something like Gamma, just to add a little more fairy consistency. If we were leaning a little bit more into the level 2 package of Sprites, I'd be a little more inclined to put in the Herald of Greenlights. I just think overall maybe it's a bit inconsistent. The other thing you can do if you have the Diviner and the Magician's Souls on the field, or if you have literally any 2 monsters on the field, is you have the potential to set up the Vert into DPE. Yeah, we're playing DPE. Fusion Destiny, it's probably easy to forget this, because I think a lot of people did. This card went to 2, so this package just got a lot more consistent. And even if you mill all of your Fusion Destinies and or Destiny Hero targets, of course, remember we are rocking the Shufflers, and that's not a Shuffler, this one. We're rocking the Shufflers in the deck to help keep those engines alive in deck, which is another reason that this Ishizu pile works particularly so well with the max amount of Shufflers, because again, like, we have a lot of cards here that have like a lot of like intricate weaving pieces, and normally, like, you know, milling, you know, your 2 Maliciouses from deck, or like, you know, part of your, like, your Deer Note, just part of one of your engines would normally be pretty devastating, but because we have the ability to put those cards back if we absolutely need to, it actually becomes totally fine. Let's see, the rest of this build I think is pretty self-explanatory. We're on the Adventure engine, as I mentioned, with both Griffin and Illegal Knight. Illegal Knight you definitely don't need, but I decided to just try it out. Hasn't come up yet, but is overall still in the build here. The Gigantic Spright, I don't really know how I feel about this one. I still kind of want to add like 1 Spright starter and 1 Spright red, because I do like the idea of being able to go into a Spright just line if you have absolutely nothing else. And there have been games where that's come up, but at the same time, it's like, it can be kind of hard to weave it into your regular plays just because you get too locked there. Definitely same, or potentially even more so if you use a Spright starter, which is why I took it out. But again, you know, might consider putting like 1 Spright starter and 1 Spright red, and I could see a world where that's right. I could also see a world where I put in another artifact, like probably just Lancia. I could see playing a second Scythe potentially, but probably just a Lancia. Lancia seems pretty good. The ability to stop banishing is pretty relevant against these pile decks. A lot of the time, stopping stuff like, you know, Block Dragon or Dragon Link's banishing, so on and so forth. So if I want another fairy monster, I think Artifact Lancia. Like, if I wanted just 1 fairy monster, I think I'd probably put in a Lancia. If I wanted 2 or 3 more, I think I'd probably put in Herald of Greenlight. I think that's about all I wanted to talk about this deck. I mean, it's certainly not all to cover with this deck. There's obviously a lot going on here, but yeah, to be fair, I am not super duper well versed or experienced in this. I really only play tested it enough to get some pretty good games we're actually going to see, in particular another game where we take the Maxx challenge again. So let's go ahead and break this list down card by card and dive straight into that. We are on 1 PSY Frame Driver, 1 Magician's Souls, 3 Herald of Orange Light, 3 Maxx, 2 PSY Framegear Gamma, 1 Diviner of Herald, 1 Spright Blue, 1 Spright Jet, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 1 Destiny Hero Denier, 3 Noh-P.U.N.K Ze Amin, 1 Water Enchantress of the Temple, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Keldo the Sacred Protector, 3 Mudora the Sword Oracle, 2 Kelbek the Ancient Vanguard, 1 Agido the Ancient Sentinel, 1 Artifact Scythe, 1 Noh-P.U.N.K Deer Note, 2 Destiny Hero Malicious, 1 Destrudo, the Lost Dragon's Fission, 1 Wandering Griffin Rider, 1 Illegal Knight, 3 Noh-P.U.N.K Foxy Tune, 1 Noh-P.U.N.K Ogre Dance, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Illusion of Chaos, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 Foolish Burial, 2 That Grass Looks Greener, 2 Fusion Destiny, 2 Rite of Aramesir, 1 Dracoback the Rideable Dragon, 1 Fateful Adventure, 2 Emergency Teleport, 2 Call by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, and then finally 1 Spright Smashers. Let me take a sip of water before you go to the extra deck here. Alright, extra deck is going to be Destiny Hero, Destroyer of Phoenix Enforcer, 1 Herald of the Arclight, 1 Shooting Riser Dragon, 1 Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, 1 Baron de Fleur, 1 Psychic Anti-Punisher, 1 Gigantic Sprite, 1 Zombie Vampire, 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Artifact Dogda, 1 Predaplant Vert Anaconda, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, 1 Spright Elf, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, and then finally 1 Axis Code Talker. And that is finally going to round out the list. Let's take a look at some gameplay here. So our first duel here is going to be against Branded Despia. It's a fairly standard Branded Despia deck, but like I mentioned in the deck profile, this is yet another game where our opponent activated Maxx and we said okay on turn 1. Yep, we're going to be taking the Maxx challenge once again. And you can also see that once again this is a hand where I've opened That Grass Looks Greener. Like I mentioned in the Adamantipator video, I very typically would not take a Maxx challenge if I did not open this card to have just an endless amount of fuel. And even more than endless, we have yet another 10 cards getting milled with these PSY frames here. Well, it's going to be 5 actually, because our opponent does have a PSY Framegear Gamma, which is a little annoying, but definitely not the end of the world. We're still going to be able to mill our opponent very nicely here. So, mill the top 5 cards of each deck. We did hit 2 Branded Fusion, but we did also hit a Despian Tragedy. It's annoying when you do that with the millers in this deck, but it's all good. I decided to special the Agido here just to have an extra material on board, and then my opponent chained Maxx, and I was looking at my opponent's deck. I thought 29 cards. Yeah, I think I could do that. Even though I missed one of the mill 5s, I think that's still going to be enough to, or a low enough of a count in deck in order to mill them out. So at this point, I was focused definitely less on making optimal plays and more just on like summoning as much as humanly possible here. If I wasn't under Maxx, I'd still be doing the same line that I'm doing here. This is the quote-unquote punk line, where again, we're going to summon Ze Amin, use her effect to, well, normally you'd use the effect to add Foxy Tune and then Foxy Tune to summon Deer Note. Here we get to just, we're already in the Deer Note stage where we're bringing back Foxy Tune. Excuse me. Alright, Chaos Ruler is going to excavate and add Orange Herald. Of course, it's not live, but our opponent doesn't necessarily need to know that. I was a little bit concerned about a Nibiru here, but it doesn't seem like our opponent's running one. I've said this before so many times, I'll say it again here. Like, you need to be running Nibiru in, not just this format, but I think in general, honestly. Like, I don't know. I've said this before, and I'll say it again here. I think even before, like, the Ishizu pile decks became a thing, before Ishizu stuff came out here, a lot of people were not running Nibiru solely because of Gigantic Sprite, which I think is a huge mistake. And I've thought it's a huge mistake this whole time, but that's just my 2 cents, you know. Yeah, so at this point, I definitely stopped making optimal plays. Like I said, I'm definitely at this rate just looking to special summon as much as possible. I actually misplayed this Dark the Dark Charmer. I should have used IP as one of the materials to throw it up here, because I always mix this up with Spright Elf. Spright Elf, you don't have to summon a monster to a particular zone, but the Charmers in general, you do have to summon the monster to the zone it points to. So I did miss out on a special summon here. It's not that big of a deal, though. We have plenty. And you might have already started noticing a bit of a trend here and why we're able to summon so much. It's because of our friend Fairy Tail Snow. Fairy Tail Snow, much like Black Dragon, is a can repeatably come back from the graveyard over and over again. Does not have a once per turn clause and is fairly insane in that regard. It's kind of wild that the card just does not have a once per turn clause at all. So it's cool though. You know, it's broken. I don't know. It's much like Halcdon. No, and it's not much like Halcdon. Halcdon was far worse. But like Halcdon, you know, I can acknowledge that it's broken. I freely do. At the same time, I love it. Again, I don't think Fairy Tail Snow is as bad as Halky Fibrax was, but they're, no, Halky Fibrax, yeah. I always get Halk's English and Japanese names, because the Japanese name is a needle fiber, which is more of a phrase than Halky Fibrax, but alright. Yeah, so here I'm summoning the Gigantic Spright, but I don't want to special with its effect just yet. I want to make sure I get as many summons as I can aside from that. So I'm going to bring out the Nightmare Unicorn, go for my access code. This will leave our opponent with 1 card left in deck, if I recall correctly. Yep, so now Gigantic Spright, the special blue. Our opponent actually had Ash Blossom, their only response at all of this. So, like, let this be a lesson. Like I said before, like, if you're going to run Maxx C, you really need to be prepared for a situation like this. And both people who I managed to deck out with Maxx C were not at all. I think it's wild that I see a lot, and I mean a lot of people playing 3 Maxx C and then just like 3 Ash Blossom, maybe some Imperms, and that's it. I mean, here, to be fair, our opponent was on PSY Framegear Gamma, but that's still like not enough. Like, it really has to be Nibiru. I think if you're playing, I've said this before, and I've said this like for literally, I think, over a year now. If you are playing 3 Maxx C, you should probably be playing a Nibiru. In fact, I would go so far as to say, if you're playing 3 Maxx C and you choose not to play Nibiru, that's a choice you really need to question and ask yourself, why am I not playing Nibiru in this deck? What is the reason to not play Nibiru? Because I think too often it's the other way around, where people automatically default to 3 Maxx C and then ask themselves, like, okay, so, you know, why should I play Nibiru? Again, I think the question is, why are you not playing Nibiru? But as you can see, we had just enough materials left for 1 more Fairy Tail Snow summon. We're going to pass over to our opponent, who then decks out. Very nice. Very beautiful. Oh, we love to see it. But we have some actual kind of more back and forth games with this deck too. So let's go and take a look at the next duel here. Alright, so this game here is going to be up against Sky Strikers, which I actually showed off pretty recently. And indeed still holds up pretty well in this meta. So it looks like we're taking the first turn here. We open grass, which we love to see. This orange Herald would have been nice if this was live, but, you know, beggars definitely can't be choosers. Opponent's not going to have an Ash Blossom for us. The grass does get to resolve. Looks like we hit a Kelbek, and then after milling 5 from our opponent, it's pretty easy to confirm what deck they're on. The 5 we milled off of our deck is mostly pretty irrelevant. If we look at our graveyard here, look at our mills overall, we do have a Shuffler, and we hit Fairy Tail Snow, both of which are very nice. The Shuffler, I'm looking at my graveyard. I can see myself using this to make my DPE engine live again, because I've got both Fusion Destinies in my graveyard, but I don't have any of my Destiny Hero monsters, so that's pretty nice. Another thing that we, of course, always have to think about with the Shufflers is our opponent's graveyard, what we can shut off. Here I'm seeing Sky Striker Ace Ray in my opponent's graveyard, so I'm thinking, okay, I can just go ahead and put that back, and then maybe this linkage as well, just to make sure that our opponent doesn't have a Sky Striker spell to recur. Could also potentially keep them off 3 spells in grave, but mostly I'm looking for my graveyard to put back Fusion Destiny. I could have also put back the Deer Note here as well. Yeah. I actually definitely should have done that before well, no, I didn't need to, because I can try to add for Foxy too. I don't have to commit to it, that's right. But the opponent's got effect failure for Ze Amin, that's totally fine with me. I really just did that to bait out a response. I'm going to go ahead and summon the Fairy Tail Snow to try to go into a DPE here. Or maybe potentially another one, like we could go for Shooting Riser here as well, but when the opponent drops Maxx C, I figure, you know, I'll just go for DPE and then call it there. Like I said, using my Shuffler to put back the Fusion Destiny, and then I end up putting back Ray, of course, as well as a linkage, just because I didn't really have... I should have put back the Deer Note. Honestly, that would have made my Punk engine live, and was definitely worth considering, even though I don't have Ze Amin or E-Telly in hand. Actually, how many Ze Amins and E-Tellys do I have in graveyard? That might have been why I didn't do that. No, I have all my E-Tellys. Yeah, I should have put back Deer Note. That was a misplay on my part. Putting back Deer Note would have made my Punk engine live again. You have to be mindful of that with this deck. Like, the thing about this pile deck in particular, well, to be fair, this is true of the Halcdon decks too, but I feel like with the milling in this deck, what's especially true of this particular Ishizu pile is that you really do have to keep track of not just like cards in general and how many copies you have, but engines as a whole and what's all left with them. Like, again, like I've been saying, you know, here I could have put back a Deer Note instead of that random linkage in my opponent's graveyard, and that would have made my whole Punk engine viable for the next turn if I drew E-Telly or Ze Amin. I do still have 2 E-Tellys left in my deck. I'm going to fire off Maxx during my opponent's draw phase just because, you know, with Sky Strikers, you can't really do it in response to Ray's summon. They'll just use Ray's effect. And then if you don't chain the Maxx, they'll just use an inherent summon to link into a Sky Striker monster. So I threw out Maxx during the draw phase, plus Sky Striker can often be on Triple Tactics talent. Our opponent wasn't here, looks like they just have the Upstart Goblins, but yeah, Lightning Storm is fine, I don't care about it at all. This is also why we summon DPE, and generally, if we can, stuff in defense mode. My opponent's going to summon Rose here, but rather than use DPE to pop her, I'm actually going to summon Fairy Tail Snow out of my graveyard and then turn her face down. The reason I did this was because this will potentially allow me for multiple ways to stop my opponent if they have multiple ways to summon a Link monster. Like, for example, now if my opponent goes to, like, let's say they activate the Hornet Drones. Now I can use Deep E to pop Snow and then pop the Hornet Drones. And then if my opponent had a plan to somehow summon an Ray after that, then I could potentially summon Snow back out of the graveyard once again and turn the Ray face down. So just trying to make use of my disruptions as well as possible here. Opponent moves to end phase. This was a huge misplay on my part. I should have definitely popped the mecha modules with the DPE. I don't know, sometimes I just forget that Fusion Destiny destroys the monster during the next end phase, which is what happened here. So yeah, I should have used DPE to pop the mecha modules, especially given that my opponent had the Shark Cannon here, because, well, they would have used Shark Cannon to take the DPE either way, but this way they're going to get to reset the Shark Cannon for free with the mecha modules, which I could have prevented. So it was definitely a bit of a misplay on my part, but it's not a huge one. Even if my opponent has my DPE, that's fine. It's just one disruption, same as Shark Cannon. It's just 2 overall minor disruptions. And even if my opponent uses DPE's effect at the very least, then I get it back during the next turn there. So I'm going to bring back Malicious with DPE's effect and then just link it off so I can start taking advantage of it. Going to use Mally's effect. Opponent's got an Ash Blossom to stop me from getting the other Mally out of deck. And then is also going to use my DPE on the IP, which is totally fine. I don't know if my opponent thought that I'd be out of plays after this, but I do still have the live Denier engraved, as well as the live Snow. And then I also have this Destrudo in my hand as well. So here, once again, my opponent's going to use the Shark Cannon to try to take the Denier, but I'm going to use Fairy Tail Snow's effect here and then just banish the Denier, so that way they don't get control of it. I've utilized this tactic before, actually, in Adamancipator, and I really should have talked about it because I actually had the duel in the I had that duel. It was during my MCS. It was one of the MCS games. Using Fairy Tail Snow to banish something that's targeted in graveyard is a very nice use of it. Particularly, my opponent went to use Call by Block Dragon, and I just banished it with Fairy Tail Snow because it was going to get banished either way. But by banishing it with Snow and not Call by, the Block Dragon resolved and didn't get negated there. So it's kind of the distinction. But yeah, here I'm just going to bring out the Sprite Elf by normal summoning the Orange Herald, targeting the blue in my graveyard. Then my opponent's just going to concede, because I could have gotten Jet. I don't think I had Smashers left in my deck, but I could have gotten Jet, and then, I don't know, I could have made some amount of plays with like Destrudo or something. I probably could have just bullshitted my way into, if not an OTK, then like enough board advantage my opponent couldn't realistically come back, but... Alright, there's that duel. Let's take a look at the next one here. Alright, this duel is going to be against Runic. It's interesting. It's a pure Runic, but they're not on any, like, floodgates. Instead, they seem to be on some sort of Necroface reasoning Cyber Valley kind of plan for assisting and milling the opponent out. But in any case, I'm sure you can already see what's going on here. We have yet another game where we went first in open grass, which does not happen nearly this often when I play Adamancipator or Dragon Link, but you know what, I guess we'll take it for this deck. So, one of the cards we milled was our good old Water Enchantress, so I'm going to go ahead and establish my adventure line here. None of these monsters I'm going to normal summon need to activate their effects anyway, or potentially normal summon. Again, need to activate their effects anyway. Plus, I can discard the Agido and mill 5 off of each deck. Looks like I did mill a Fairy Tale Snow for my opponent's deck, but I'm sure we have shufflers in here, so we're gonna make sure to put that back. Now from here, I actually get to do a DPE and Artifact Scythe setup as well. The condition for that is pretty easy. You generally just need like any 2 monsters, an extender, and then an effect you can activate on board. You use your 2 monsters to go into Dogda, summon your extender, use your effect that activates on board. It could even be just like I actually end up call buying the Fairy Tale Snow and not shuffling it back in order to resolve the Dogda's effect. But from there, Dogda sets Scythe from deck. Then you use Dogda and your extender to go into Vert like I did here. And then now we can use Vert to summon DP. I actually misplayed here. I should have specialed Spright Red for my hand before activating DP's effect, because now I can't special anything other than Dark Warriors due to the effect of Fusion Destiny. But I could have had an additional disruption of Fairy Tale, Spright Red on board as well to negate and destroy a monster effect by sacking the Vert here. So yeah, this was the duel where I was playing with the old Spright Starter and Spright Red package, which this is another reason I like it too. Like, and potentially thought about adding Spright Carrot as well. You make Link 2s all the time in this deck, so it's not too out there to assume you could just throw out a Spright Red and or Carrot. Yeah, I called level 2 when my opponent played Reasoning here because I could tell from milling them, like with the 1 Day of Peace and multiple Runic Golden Droplets, I'm like, okay, they're obviously on some kind of pure Runic plan. So when they played Reasoning, I anticipated Cyber Side, because I've seen pure Runic decks do that before, but it ended up being a Necroface instead. In retrospect, I'm actually glad that I ended up sending the Necroface to the field and not putting it in the graveyard. I feel like my opponent could have maybe more easily banished it if it was in the graveyard. Although I think, to be fair, one of the main reasons they were counting on doing that was Fairy Tale Snow, which again, we were able to get out of their grave with Called By. I don't care at all about my opponent like milling me here with the Runic Dispelling. And in fact, I do have a Shuffler in the graveyard, as we may well remember. I actually have 1 of each, so I'm just going to use Mudora's effect to target the same 3 spells Fountain does. That way they go back by Mudora's effect, not Fountain's, and then as a result, the opponent does not get to draw any cards. So my opponent only has 1 random unknown card that's unaccounted for at this point, and it's likely not enough to carry them out of the game, and we confirm that it's not, as our opponent then concedes. So yeah, there we got a very classic adventure DPE Scythe lock setup, and look at that, we didn't even need it at all. Like, legitimately, you see, we didn't even resolve the DPE or the Griffin, and the Scythe was still face down. Even as my opponent was like, I don't know, I saw they were on Runic, and I'm like, alright, well I can already stop the Fountain. Once it was pure Runic anyway, I was like, alright, I can already stop the Fountain, and I don't really care about Hugin otherwise, so yeah, they can summon from extra deck, that's fine. It's so nice. So nice having the Shufflers and just not having to worry about Runic Fountain when you do. Oh, love it. But we have 1 more duel to take a look at. Let's dive straight into it. And our last game here is going to be up against Adamancipator. Of course, there's 60 cards in on the Ishizu package. I noticed this build is playing a Danger package, which seems a bit odd in Adamancipator to me. But anyway, we're going to go second this time. We still opened Grass, because apparently this is the deck we just always open Grass with. I'm going to try to Maxi during my opponent's draw phase, but they've got the Emergency Teleport to Chain, which is a bit baffled by, but I thought to myself, okay, maybe they have some kind of like end board they can end down with only like 1 or 2 summons that's still pretty good, but let's see, yeah, they activate the Danger Nessie here, giving me a draw of E-Telly, and then sinking into Baron de Fleur. So I wanted to show this game, honestly, mainly for not even a play I did, but this play that my opponent did here, which is one reason why the Adventure Engine, or why the Danger Engine is pretty good. I actually consider the Danger Engine for this pile deck as well, instead of just straight up copying the Diviner and Spright Engine that Trishula topped with, but I decided to just do a little bit of net decking instead. But no, I really like the Danger Engine for this, for the ability to potentially end on a big synchro very quickly, or within a relatively few number of summons. The problem, I just don't like it in Adamancipator. I would totally be down to try Dangers in like more of a pile deck, or honestly, if we also play the Ishizus with Adventure Phantom Knight, which I do actually plan on testing very soon here. So, But here we're just the luckiest player in the world and top decked the Diviner of the Herald as well. I mean, to be fair, even if we didn't have Diviner of Herald, like, we have E-Telly and Foolish and Fusion Destiny in this hand. Like, we could have, I think we could have outplayed, or played around rather, this Baron to Fleur, even if we hadn't gotten stupid lucky. But here, we do have the Orange Herald and Diviner, so definitely going to make good use of that when my opponent goes to use Baron here. Didn't use it on E-Telly, but they do use it on Ze Amin, so of course I'm just going to respond with Herald of the Orange Light, pitching the Diviner, and I think my opponent just concedes at this point, which is a bit unfortunate, but kind of happens when you're in Diamond 1. Unfortunately, people up here just do kind of concede at the drop of a hat. If you saw me on Twitter the other day, you know I was complaining about that when trying to get games for Dragon Link especially, so it's going to be a very short duel here, but I just wanted to show, again, even more than anything I did, the fact that my opponent did show off just how good the Danger Engine could be, not just for like cycling cards or discarding a Ishizu fodder from hand, but also just for the ability to do some very quick big synchros like our opponent did just there. So that's going to be all for this video. Thank you so much for watching this far. At this point, yeah, let's just go ahead and move on to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.